Hey everybody, it's Rob Scheer, the founder of Comfort Cases and the host of Fostering Change. You know what? I want to say thank you and welcome to season 7. Season 7, I can't believe it's here. Do me a big favor. I really want you to listen. I want you to comment, and I definitely want you to subscribe. So I hope you enjoy this season as much as I've enjoyed our guests. Now it's time for my next guest. I am so thrilled about this next guest. I actually became friends with our next guest several years ago. If you all remember, her name is Charell Star. She was actually did the Feeling Wanted documentary, which by the way, they're using that documentary for training purposes. And also where I actually met her when I read her story was Humans of New York. I don't know if you all watch that. They have it in on Facebook, on Instagram. And I saw her on there and was just mesmerized. And I mean, you want to talk about you meet somebody that has a light shining off of them. This is exactly this person. And by the way, she raised over $140,000 with that when she was on Humans of New York. So she has a new book out. Finally, she has a book out. I'm so excited. This book was, oh my gosh. First of all, it was a quick read. I was really surprised. I actually read it while I was on a plane going from one coast to the next. It was a very quick read. It's a good read. Let me tell you something. Those who read my memoir, there's a lot of tears. But let me tell you something. There are tears here, but there are a lot of laughs. And that's something I took away from. So without further ado, I want to introduce you all to my friend again, who's been on our podcast, Charell Star.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me. Oh, what
Oh,
a lovely introduction.
I will tell you, you just light up a room. You just light up a room. Your smile, your energy. I am so lucky. I mean, there's so many times that you meet people that you're just like, wow, that's a great person. But I'm so lucky I get to call you my friend. And when I saw that you were finally, and I know people have been knocking on you to write this book, that you were finally writing your book. What made you decide to take that step?
Honestly, I was speaking at an event. It was actually for middle schoolers, and one of the youth who was at the event asked me if I had a book, and I could see in her face that like she really wanted, to get deeper in my story. She was looking for sort of connection points, and I didn't have anything to offer her. So I said in that moment, okay, I'm gonna finally put pen to paper and write this book. And so I have it not only for speaking engagements, for any youth, any young professional out there who's just looking for to see what life looks like on the other side of trauma, and what it could look like. And so that was really the inspiration for me putting like pen to paper.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Sherelle, do you find, you and I both, I mean, we grew up in the system, aging out of the system and, not ever having my forever family. And, do you ever find the fact that, for so many times that we are coming into an age where people are starting to tell their story more?
Yeah, no, I love this generation of youth, of advocates who are just open about telling their story. I think for all the bad things about social media, the fact that it's given people a platform to share their story, to connect with others who've gone through the same journey that they've gone, and it's been a huge boon for, I think, youth in care, youth who've aged out of care, advocates just to connect. It's been actually incredible. And I think people are more willing to tell their stories because they know there should be no shame behind it.
Exactly, exactly. And for me, very much like I took out of your book as well. And by the way, everybody, it's called The Trash Bag Tales. You know how I feel about trash bags. It's called The Trash Bag Tales and Other Stories from an Accidentally Happy Life. And I have to tell you, there is a part in this book, and I actually highlighted it because I love this line. I'm going to read this line to everybody. Consider this memoir your backstage pass, complete with laughter, tears, and a few moments that will make you question whether I've been living in a comedy and a drama. I love that. But hey, who needs fiction when reality is this entertaining? Let me tell you something. When I opened up that book and I read that very first letter from the I was like, are you kidding me? Only you. only you. And the fact is that I think that this book is a must-read book for kids before they age out of the system. And I think, let me tell you the reason why I got what I took away from this. And by the way, you should see how big my bookshelf, I have authors on all the time. I am constantly reading. My kids laugh at me and they're like, Dad, you got 5 books next to your bed and you're reading 5 of them. I'm like, I got to get through these books because this one I took with me, only book I took with me on my flight. And it really, there were moments that I think people thought I was a little bit bat crazy on that plane because I was laughing out loud, and I really think the reason that our youth should read this book is because I think that for so many times they feel like they're failures. They feel like there is no hope at the end, that there isn't any achievement or they can have. And here you are, someone, who's grown up in the system and has made such a success of yourself. I think people need to read this more. Tell me, and so if people, those who don't remember when you were on our podcast before, give some people a little bit of background of your story.
Yeah. So I had lived with my great grandmother, and that's my earliest memory. And I remember a social worker coming to our house, throwing my things in trash bag, and carrying me out of this only home that I had ever known from someone who I loved and felt loved. And she dropped me off in what I believe is my first foster home. And from there, I bounced around the system. I was in 6 different homes in 6 different years. Literally, starting school in the middle of school years, not missing a ton of school, people not taking me to school. And it was a very, very hard time where I experienced, physical abuse. I experienced sexual abuse, mental abuse while I was in care. I also had some really nice moments as well. And so, you have to balance all of that out. But care was really, really hard. And when I was reunified with my mom, because ended up being reunified with my mom, we had a very challenging sort of reunification because I had not lived with her. I really didn't know her very well. And I just sort of got dropped off there. And there was no therapy, there was no reconciliation, there was no sort of conversation about what this sort of next stage of my life could look like. And I was just sort of left to carry all this trauma and all this baggage by myself and figure it out. And so that journey of sort of being in care, being reunified, trying to figure out who I wanted to be in the world is really what I cover in this book. And like, there's a lots of stumbles, lots of falls in my story. But I think the fact that, I keep going and just keep trying to better myself, reinvent myself, figure out what I like about myself and about like this world. I think that's an inspiration. And I think that should be inspiring to other people to know you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have it all figured out. Sometimes we are the unlucky ones and we get, layered on with this baggage, but it doesn't mean you have to carry it for the rest of your life.
Exactly, exactly. Where do you get your grit?
I think I get my grit from my great grandmother. Even though I didn't live with her that long, I remember what it was like to feel loved. I remember what it was like to feel safe, and wanted. And like knowing that and having that within me just it gives me a drive to keep moving forward. And that's the life I wanted to build for myself.
I love that. I love that because I do believe that each and every one of us have grit. It's whether we pull that grit up, just, like me, I decided that I didn't want to be a statistic.
Yeah,
I didn't want to be,
exactly.
and I'm the youngest of 10, and I didn't want to turn out what they expected me to turn out to be. I knew
Exactly.
that I could do more. And like you, I fumbled and I fell and there were times that I gave myself pity parties and but the fact is that I want our listeners to know is that foster care actually, I've met thousands and thousands of kids in the last 13 years. I've never
Mhm.
met one kid who ever said I want to be in foster care.
No, no.
Never.
And you never will. You never will.
Yeah. And the fact is that I think people need to understand is that kids come into the system because of choices other people made, that other
Exactly.
people made. And when I hear you talk about the reunification, and I still see to this day what we call those boomerang kids. These are kids that the courts are pushing so hard for reunification because they need those statistics. And they put kids back in situations that within 6 to 8 months, they're back within the system. But the sad part is they're back in the system with another stranger.
Right.
They're
Right.
back in the system
Exactly.
with another stranger, and I think that point that we have already, first of all, when a child comes in the system, we've already failed.
Right.
We've already,
100%.
yeah, we've already failed. If there were two things that you could change within our system, Charell, what would that be?
If there was two things I could change, number one, just the sheer number of youth who end up in care. We penalize people for being poor a lot of times, and we just take their kids from them when other resources could help the family in that moment, not actually go through this crisis or this terrible situation. As you know, 75% of youth who end up in care end up because of what's deemed neglect. And a lot of that neglect sort of catch-all can be a parent lost a job, they live in a terrible place, and because they have a slumlord for a landlord, which I have a really funny story about, which will be in my next book. And just all these like terrible like moments, these like moments that we could just actually help these families by providing additional resources, providing additional support. There's no reason to remove a youth in those situations. But obviously, there's 25% of these situations where like you do need to be removed. You should not remain in this household. And so figuring that out about actually providing families the resources when for the extremely large numbers of the population that's just being penalized for being poor, and then leaning in obviously for the youth who actually need it, because we're wasting so many resources on youth who shouldn't be here in the first place. We
Right,
can't actually help youth who need to be here, who
right.
need to have foster parents step in to take care of them, and look out for them and possibly adopt them if they can't be reunified. And so I would say really actually looking at the numbers, leaning in and figuring out how we're going to like apply our resources so we can help kids actually not end up in the system if they don't need to be there, and actually end up in a permanent home if they do need to be there.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I've always wondered if why that we take children out of homes and stick them with strangers and pay those strangers when
Hmm.
actually, if we were to go into the family and foster the family,
Yep.
stabilize the family,
Yes.
give them, first of all, let's pay a living wage. Okay.
Yes,
Let's
exactly.
pay a living wage because we know for a fact that children who enter foster care, and you're right, about 25% of these kids, they need to be in foster care. I adopted two that needed to be in foster care, but I also adopted two that they shouldn't have ever been put in foster care. And I'm lucky
Right.
that I have a great relationship with their bio family because the fact is that they were taken because a young mother who had been in the system, who
Hmm.
never had the guidance she needed, just needed someone to be there to love her, to lift her up and say that you're worthy. And your worthiness is not by laying next to a man,
Right.
and understand that. But for me, I just can't understand why we as a society spend billions of
Yep.
dollars on a system that we know is already shattered, when what we could do is go in and foster the family, or maybe take the perpetrator out and not
Uh,
remove the kid. Why can't we do
exactly.
that? And the fact is that we know kids are taken away from their mother. And by the way, I say mothers because guys,
Overwhelmingly.
you got to step up to the plate
Yes.
because
Yes.
too many deadbeat dads are out there and not stepping up to the plate. So mom's not able to pay for the electric. So the electric get cuts off. We take her kids.
Right.
Mom leaves her 10-year-old with her 15-year-old because she can't afford daycare and can't afford a sitter. And we come in, we take her kids. We know for a fact that these kids are better off in the situation that they're in if we could just make the situation a little better.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's these small like tweaks that we would need to do, and actually providing the actual resources directly to these parents. And it would change not only the entire foster care system, but it would actually improve the lives of these families, the full family, where they can actually stand on their own. It makes no sense to be removing kids for an electric bill or the lack of childcare. Let's provide those things to them.
Right, right. No, I agree with you
Yes.
100%. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I worry about all the time, and I want to know your opinion on this, is, we fail when it comes to kids who are aging out of our system.
Hmm.
I mean, the fact is we come in on these white horses to save these babies and save these little ones. Average age of a kid in foster care is 7 years old.
Yep.
We want to save them when they're cute and they're cuddly.
Hmm.
But then all of a sudden they become 16 and 17, and we're like, oh, what the hell? You know,
Right.
and then we want to start tapping them on their shoulder and say, "Hey, let's talk about what your future is going to be." By the way, I'm already pissed off at you. You know,
Yes.
you have jumped me from home to home to home to home. You've put me, and by the way, they weren't homes; they were just beds.
Beds. Right.
And
Yep.
number two, every time I turn around, I got a new social worker.
Hmm.
And now you want to talk to me about, no, I'm waiting till I'm 18.
Right.
I'm getting the heck out of
Right.
Dodge. You
Right.
know,
You haven't done a single year in school in a consistent location. You've been bounced around, like your education has holes in it. 100%. Yes.
and I think what we need to do as a society is once a child enters the system, we need to start planning for an exit plan.
Hmm.
I think that if we can pay a stranger a stipend, and by the way, I have 5 kids. I know that's not cheap. By the way, I got 5 kids. All of them got their license now. You should see my car insurance bill, and I've got 3 off to college this fall. And so,
Amazing.
but it's not cheap having kids.
No.
But if we could take a little bit of that money
Yeah.
and put it in an interest-bearing savings account for when
Hmm.
it does age out, that they
Hmm.
have a net, they can have a down payment for a car, or their rent.
Right.
Instead, some states, I mean, I can tell you the state that connects to my state writes them a check for $500 and says, see you later. What can we do about this?
I mean, so much. I actually am on the board of City Living NYC, so City Living New York, and that's an organization that helps youth who've aged out of foster care. And our entire mission is to ensure that youth who are aging out of foster care in New York do not end up homeless. 50% of youth who age out of care are homeless within 2 years. 2 years. Most of them are aging out straight onto the streets because the shelters in New York City are filled, and so they can't even go to a shelter when they are basically put out of foster care. And so City Living obviously provides resources with helping them find a shelter bed if they need it, actually finding an apartment within New York City, which is in New York City,
And
which is difficult. When you get a check of something like, I don't know, it's under like $1,500 that they give you, that doesn't pay a deposit in New York City. So City Living helps you find an apartment, helps you pay your deposit, helps you find a job, and helps you stay in that apartment. Every youth who's entered City Living program, this is a volunteer program for youth who've aged out of out of foster care. They do not have to be in it. They actually volunteer and sign up for it. Every youth who's entered this program, 100% have maintained their apartments in the entire time City Living has been in existence, and it's been about 6 years. And so, literally providing youth resources, teaching them what to do, actually being that parental figure or that mentor figure in their life to actually help them navigate the system. We have youth who are aging out of care without IDs.
yeah,
How do you get an apartment? How do you get a job if you do not have an ID? Literally, this is something the government should be providing because in local parentis, that is what you are as foster parents, as the government. You're in local parentis for these youth. How do you let them age out without ID to prove who they are? And what happens when they age out and they don't have ID? They can't even go back to the
no,
foster care system to get their paperwork because, again, they don't have ID. It becomes this crazy cycle of them being trapped outside of the system because no one actually helped them while they were in the system. And so City Living actually will help them with that and among other issues. But literally, one of the small things we could do is make it mandatory that every youth in foster care be given an ID, driver's license and passport, copy of their social security card, and a copy of their birth certificate, regardless of whether you're going to reunified, whether you're going to age out. When you hit the system, these are the documentations that need to travel with you from place to place so that if you age out, if you decide to, you and have the basic things you need to
basics.
start a life.
Basics. Let me tell you something. When my son, 18 years old, arrived at my home, never thought I'd have a fifth child, and we got a copy of his birth certificate, and we found out that they were actually celebrating his birthday on the wrong day.
See?
And
Yeah, happens all the time.
I mean, and it happened to me. And that was the shocking part. It happened to me. I was 16 till
Yes.
I found out my true birth date. And that to me, again, it's a fail of the foster system when it
Yes.
comes to foster parents. It's like
Mhm.
if you're going to be a foster parent, be a parent.
Yes.
My
First.
5 kids, they have passports, they have their driver's license, they have their social security card. As a matter of fact, my husband's made sure that they memorize their social security number. I mean,
Good.
that's
Yes.
what parents do. You
Yes.
set your kid up on the right path. Let me tell you something. Having conversations with you just truly energizes me. Everybody, the book is called Trash Bag Tales. I'm telling you, we're gonna have a link right here. Also, I want to put the link on for the organization in New York for our followers to click on and donate because I love that. But my last question for you in the state of New York, and actually in the city, they're getting ready to vote. And I don't know if you're aware, they're voting on the trash bags.
Yes.
It is a bill that I actually got passed in our state in October, and our amazing Governor Moore signed that bill and actually put a budget to make sure that no children in foster care will carry a trash bag. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel absolutely incredible. This is something I've talked about for a very long time. And every time I talk, to advocates or foster parents in a group, there's always someone that raises their hand and says, my youth still arrived at my house with a trash bag. I actually had a funny story. We had the head of ACS in the room, and a foster parent raised her hand. So I was telling the story about arriving with a trash bag, and she literally stood up and said, they have budget. I don't understand why this is happening. And I'm like, this is happening because no one is actually making them think about how it feels to actually show up with all of your things thrown in a trash bag, like how dehumanizing that is. And but to hear that you actually have money for this, it's in the budget already, and you're just not doing it is even wilder, actually wilder. But literally, it's falling through the cracks. So the idea that like this is becoming a national topic, a topic of conversation, because it's such a small thing, but it has huge
Yes.
implications for youth who are in care. And the fact that I was in care years ago, and this is still an issue that you have to
I was in
have
the care
laws. Yeah,
70s. In
yes.
the 70s. And
It
my
is,
children still arrived with trash bags,
yes.
in 2000s.
Right. So thank you so much for advocating for this. And, I think people just don't understand how big this really, really is in helping a youth who already has everything taken from them. Like in that moment when you are get taken from your home and you have your things thrown in trash bags, how absolutely dehumanizing, how low you feel in that moment. And the fact that like you are actively petitioning and advocating and passing laws to stop this is incredible.
Yeah, and the fact is that we are seeing it like, just yesterday on the floor in Louisiana, they are debating it. And it's like, to me, there's no debate. There's no debate. And at least somebody showed up on your end. On my end, when I testified in the Judicial Committee in my state, they only wrote a letter and says it doesn't happen. But guess what? We did what you did. We brought people in who said, hey, by the way, my kids arrive with trash bags.
Yes.
And
Yes.
by the way, my kids also arrive with trash
Right.
bags. And they are
Yeah.
arriving with trash bags. But I want everybody to know something. And this is I don't want anybody to think that we are sitting here bashing social workers because
No.
the reason the social workers have the trash bags is because they are given no other resources.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, they are literally given no other resources whatsoever. I actually was in a child welfare office, and I was meeting with the head of child welfare in a state. I won't say who it was, but I asked them why they hadn't ordered our cases because ours are free. And
Hmm.
I said, and she says, we just don't have room. Now, here I'm sitting in this office where it is huge. She has a couch, a love seat, a round table, her desk.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, here you have triple the amount of space that you need. And you're
Hmm.
saying you don't have room to
For a
put,
couple of boxes.
yeah, for a couple of boxes,
Right.
essential items for children for when they enter the system, that they can let us know, babe, somebody cares about me.
Yes.
Somebody
Yes.
cares about me.
Yeah.
Ugh, let me tell you something. I just have to say thank you. Thank you for finally writing this amazing book. Everybody, you can click right here. Please, please, please order it. And do me a favor, after you order it for somebody else, because it is truly an amazing, amazing book. And by the way, big surprise, everybody. Season seven's coming up, and my amazing friend Charell is going to come back and she's going to co-host a episode with us because I'm going to tell you something. Probably the longest podcast I've had this season, but it's been worth it because you, my friend, you're a star. You're a star, and
Oh,
I just
thank
can't thank you
you.
enough for shining so bright for so many of us who look at you and understand that. By the way, we don't have to be a statistic. We can take all of that battered, bruised trauma and turn this into brightness and really find our grit. And I love it that you found it from your great grandmother at that. You know what, Charell? Thank you for being a good human. Everybody, this is one more episode left of this season. It has been an amazing season. I am energized. I do actually, for the first time, can say I see light at the end of the tunnel. And I see that light because of amazing people like Charell who are shining that light so bright for us all to draw towards it. So just remember, you have an opportunity to be a doer, to be a doer. And if we're not doing for our children, what's our purpose? Have a great day, everybody.